Hi, welcome to Box Guitar Tuition. So, got another classic album inspection for you today. This day, November the 4th, 1981, 40 years ago, Black Sabbath released Mob Rules, their second album with Ronnie James Dio and the first with Vinny Appice on drums. So one of the differences with this album from the Heaven and Hell album, Heaven and Hell had been written principally at home in Dio, just in a room with a small amplifier. Geezer Butler had later sort of come back to the band, as had Bill Ward. They did the Heaven and Hell album, it's a fucking classic, and they went off on tour. Bill Ward, I'm not sure how many dates he did, but he left, Vinny Appice came in. But it was pretty smooth because Vinny Appice knew all the parts. So basically, once all that had finished, they reconvened at a house in Toluca Lake in Los Angeles and bought a portable studio, and the idea was they were rehearsing their writing, and the idea was to record themselves. But it didn't work out, they couldn't get a guitar sound, so they went to the record plant in Los Angeles with producer Martin Birch. This time, I think Iommi, Butler and Birch were all indulging in the old white powder. So there was tension and paranoia. It wasn't the happy experience of Heaven and Hell. I think when this album came out, I think it got accused of being Heaven and Hell Part 2. I think the reason for that is the like-for-like track sequencing. So it begins with an up-tempo number that's a bit like Neon Nights. The final number's the kind of big ballad. The track, not prior to that, but the one before that's kind of like the sort of commercial rocker and so on. But over the years, it's kind of got a better reputation. It's a lot of people's favourite Dio era Sabbath album. I think it has better production. It's got like a really big sort of dirty sound. Bass is kind of distorted. Obviously the guitars are. But it's got a cracking drum sound, Vinny Appice. Not that Heaven and Hell didn't have a great drum sound and performance from Bill Ward. But Appice is kind of a little tighter than Ward. But let's look at the tracks on this. So it opens up with one of my favourite Dio era tracks, Turn Up the Night. So this is 3 minutes 42 seconds. It was a single. This is a great track, and you can see the Neon Nights comparison. It's a similar tempo. It's got a E pedal tone, so it's on the scratch itching. But it's a great track. It's quite it's got a happy sort of upbeat melody line which counteracts with the heaviness, which worked really well on Neon Nights. Really cool sort of little wah-wah pentatonic fills from Tony Iommi. And Dio's on it, and yet the sound's kind of bigger but tighter. Dio's vocals are quite dry. The bass and the guitar kind of operate in this same sort of wide but condensed sonic space, and the drums are really natural, really powerful behind it. It's a great opening track. And then track 2's maybe my favourite track on the album. It's Voodoo. So this has got a great Iommi riff. Here, Dio's vocals have a bit more delay on them, a bit more open sounding. Pumping bass. Kind of good groove on this. I never liked this as much when I played it live because I tend to play it too fast and it just lost its feel. But it shows the deceptive range of Dio. If you're a singer, try singing along with the chorus. It's right up. It's like Rainbow in the Dark or Beyond. But it's got really cool harmonies as well. Really like the lyric. I suppose it's kind of a bit like Lady Evil in its lyrical content, but it's a great track, real classic. And then track 3 is another classic. So again, the like for like comparison with this is the track Heaven and Hell. So you can say, this is the album's Heaven and Hell track. But the Sign of the Southern Cross is a lot slower. It's really doomy. I think it shows Appice's ability, like Ward's, to play at a very slow tempo but very tightly. The timing, he's just got the space just right. Geezer Butler uses some cool sort of effects on his bass for the pedal tone. The main riff's very powerful. The vocals are like quite a lot of sort of Dio era tracks. It starts with like a clean intro, like Children of the Sea. Got nice wind noises. It's a really atmospheric track, and the fantasy it evokes in your mind's really, really cool. Good solo. How long's the track? Sorry, 7:46. So this is probably the longest track of the Dio era. Probably Sabbath's longest track since the Sabotage album, Megalomania and so forth, or the Writ. But classic track. So right off the bat, you got 3 corking songs on this album. It sounds better. if you're comparing it, I mean, Neon Knights, Children of the Sea, Lady Evil, are those better tracks? I mean, yeah, for me they probably are, but it doesn't detract from how top these tracks are. Next track kind of doesn't totally work for me. I think it's too long. E5150. I think little instrumentals are cool and made a cool intro tape for the band. But it's 2 minutes and 54 seconds, and this needs a minute lopping off it. It would set up the next track better, but it has got this kind of sparkly synth sound before the riff to Mob Rules comes in. So this track was originally recorded for the heavy metal album, I think, the cartoon soundtrack, as was E5150, but it was just featured on the film, not on the soundtrack. But Mob Rules classic riff. Again, I think it shows the sort of strength of the rhythm section. Geezer and Vinny put this amazing swing into it, and it really pounds. Omi pulls off a cool face melter, and Dio gives like a really raucous vocal, probably his most aggressive vocal he's given at that point. 3 minutes 14, perfect sort of metal single really. This is a real classic again. Great lyric as well. I think Dio's warning about when things descend into anarchy and chaos. That's not a good thing. You might want to fight the power, so to speak, but you've got to be organised to do that. So it's a cool lyric, and actually the album cover they used a band artist called Greg Hildebrand. He's got a twin brother. I think they adapted the artwork to pay the license for it. It's really cool. Interesting enough, it's kind of like a bit like Van Halen's Fair Warning, the same sort of hues. And again, it's a piece of sort of licensed artwork depicting violence, or Mob Rules more suggests violence. But it is a great piece of artwork. So that's the end of side one. You've got 4 absolute corking tracks there. No complaints. I think side 2, when we come to it, tails off, but I still think it's got a couple of corking tracks. So opens side 2 to Country Girl. I think they used to play this live around this time, and this is a really catchy track. It's just a straight ahead track. It's got a really simple riff, really melodic vocal from Dio. Breaks down to a nice clean middle section before the solo. I really like it. And it's a good track. And then probably the album's kind of forgotten track, or one of them slipping away. I suppose this is like the Walk Away track. Although I don't think it's a great track, I do think it's a good track. It's got kind of Led Zeppelin sort of feel, like I'm trying to think, Good Times, Bad Times, or something like that. And Vinny Appice lays down a really great groove with Geezer Butler, and there's a good bit in the middle of Wyoming, Butler trade off, and Geezer does a bass solo. So it's a good commercial sort of track, slighter, but it's those kind of tracks that Dio's always done in bands, like Do You Close Your Eyes, Sensitive to Light, stuff like that, Walk Away. But I think it's stronger than Walk Away. I think that, like I said, the drums and the bass on this are excellent. So 6 out of 10 track is a good filler track. Next track, again, sort of the deep cut classic on this album, Falling Off the Edge of the World. So it's quite exploratory, this track, really. It starts off with like a clean intro with atmospheric guitars, overdubbed with a sort of mournful vocal by Ronnie. Then it's got this like really powerful power chord bit, and I think Vinny Appice, when the drum beat comes in, I think they've tracked over a floor tom, a big tom basically, in with the snare, so it just sounds massive. And then it goes into an up-tempo riff, and off it powers with a great vocal by Ronnie James Dio, really cool solo. I saw him play this live, and it's like a real, quite epic production piece, really. So that's a great track, 5 minutes, but again, it's pardon me, it stretches out. And then it finishes over and over, and again, the like for like, Heaven and Hell, this is like the Lonely Is the Word track. It's a good track. What's interesting on this is the productions, the kind of more separation on this. So Tony Iommi's kind of playing a single note line, and the drums got a bit more reverb, a bit more open, and Ronnie's vocals are kind of spaced off more, so you can kind of hear the band individually more on this. I think the track's a bit too long, but it is nice. It's got a 3/4 time, and it's slow, and it shows great. Appice, he does great fills, and he uses the space really uniquely. So he really nails it, this album, Vinny Appice. You know, it's his first big opportunity and he takes it, I think. Shows lots of flair, taste and groove, which is what you want. So again, it's a kind of 6 out of track. It's an interesting one. You know, I've always felt Lonely is the World. I mean, it's probably a better track, but I always felt that Heaven and Hell tails off on those last 2 tracks a bit. Because the ones before that are so corking. So, I mean, you know, is this better than Heaven and Hell? I think the sort of classic tracks on Heaven and Hell are kind of more classic. You Can't Deny, Neon Nights, Children of the Sea, Heaven and Hell Die Young are really titanic tracks in the Dio Sabbath catalogue. But there's no doubt there's 4 tracks on side one absolutely cracking and Falling Off the Edge of the World. You know, are really cool tracks, and it's got good filler cuts. So I wouldn't dispute if someone came up to me and said, I prefer the Mob Rules, because there's some elements that are better. This album didn't do as well as Heaven and Hell. It charted top 15 in the UK. I'm not sure where it was. I think it was 23 or something like that in America. And they got a gold disc, but Heaven and Hell had gone platinum. But the cracks were starting to show, and unfortunately one of the great lineups in metal dispersed. And although they came back and made some good music, it was never the same as those those 2 albums. But it's definitely a classic for me. It deserves its title of classic. I think it's an album people kind of discovered a bit later on, really. And looking at it objectively now, it's part of that just era when metal 80, 81, 82, where just a lot of classic heavy metal was being made, and the sound of metal was being refined and designed, so to speak. Okay, so I think I've covered everything now. That's the Mob Rules, 40 years old today. Hope you enjoyed that. Remember to share and subscribe if you enjoy these. Thanks very much, and see you soon. Bye now.